1 second. Are we
Okay.
live? Oh, we're live.
We are indeed live. That's typical, that is. That's a typical start, isn't it? I did that
It
with, I
is.
was recording with Philip Moriarty. Just as it was about to start, it said, oh, hang on a minute now. Okay, hi, everybody. Apologies for putting the wrong day there, Endless Mystify, but you're here, aren't you? So that's really all that matters. So welcome, everybody, here today with Friended. Hi, Friended, how are you?
I am good. How are you doing, Noel?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a sort of afternoon for me, so I had a chance to have a few coffees and get myself together.
It's 5:30 in the morning here.
Yeah,
So
but
if you beat up on me, I have an excuse.
This is why I claim. This is why I pretend to have a 3-year-old boy and say that I can only do it in these times. It's just to give me a sort of advantage.
That's funny.
It's true. So we're talking here today. The aim of this stream then is to talk about anti-theism, and I intend to be defending. I'm going to be the doughty defender, hopefully, of anti-theism, and you're going to give me the criticisms of that. And can I just get one thing straight? Are you an atheist or a theist?
I am an atheist, very much an atheist. Right.
So
yeah. I am here to defend science.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's hope I'm not. Let's hope that you're here to defend science, and I'm not here to trash science, and that we can arrive at some kind of median point where there's a version of anti-theism that's not as anti-science as what you seem to have experienced. So what I was going to suggest is, and I know I've mentioned this to you, but let's just for the benefit of everybody else. Is that you've given me some things which I'll screen share perhaps when the time is right. You've given me a list of core claims and assertions of anti-theists, which chimes in with defining anti-theism, which is, I think, somewhere where we need to start. And I've got a couple of bits that I'd like to say just to precurse that as well, but it doesn't trample on your list in any way. So there's a lot to discuss in that. It's quite an interesting list, I think. And then you've got these questions. So then we'll move on to them.
Okay.
But I thought what was interesting, so you got in touch with me on Twitter. On Twitter, yes. Indeed, on Twitter.
Oh,
I'm 45 years old. It's hard to keep up with all these different forms of social media. That's why I'm always late.
Sit down, son. I'm 48, okay?
Fair enough. Fair enough. I haven't got an excuse.
Boys.
To each one of these parties. But I know you said you'd had some exchanges, and I know this is something that's become more and more of an issue. I mean, it's something that I've been involved in having these discussions, maybe not so much in the last 4 years, but over the nearly 10 years I've been on YouTube having these discussions, but more with theists than atheists. And it seems to be a new thing now, this band of atheists who are
the science has changed. This all began because of a tweet exchange I had with Dusty Smith, where Dusty Smith was saying, now there's all these atheists that are pro-religion. And I asked him, well, what do we do if the science is against us? Do we deny the science like the religious people have? I mean, that's why things have changed.
Right. Okay. And then you've had an exchange with this Reese. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I got the impression that effectively that you weren't you were somewhat underwhelmed with the responses you were getting, and so I don't know whether you wanted to have a hangout with me in an effort to gain either to get some ponage points, or because you expected some less underwhelming responses.
Hey, not at all. You and I have always been civil.
They're both reasonable things to do on YouTube, I think, given the culture of YouTube. So.
Well, if anyone's going to get the ponage, it's going to be me, because like I'm the one that's getting called names, and I mean, porch atheist is the one that people seem to like. It feels a tad racist to me, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's quite amusing that. So we'll kick off then, and what I just say in advance of all of this is that this is effectively. It's a debate. It's an informal debate, I suppose. But one thing that I don't like about debates is it tends to be a case of here's a proposition and it's kind of win or lose, and I don't particularly like that, because most things are more complicated than that. And so I'd like this to be more of it's a debate, but it's a discussion of these things to find out if we can find a little bit of common ground, find out the points that we actually disagree on. So maybe the best place to start then is with a little bit of a definition of anti-theism. And so I know that you'd got this list of things that you wanted to list of 7 things, which I can put up on screen in a minute. But there was just a couple of bits that I wanted to say in advance.
Go ahead.
Because they're not really points that you're arguing on, but I think they're important points that where anti-theism tends to be misrepresented. So the first, a discussion that I've had over the myriad sort of years that I've discussed these things online with, largely with theists, is that what they will suggest is that they'll talk about atheism as of a lack of belief in gods, and they'll say, so if that's all it is, why are you so concerned with the religious, right? If it's just a lack of belief in God, you shouldn't really give a crap about it. And I always make 2 points with regard to that. The first is that although I think, and I won't go into it now, but I think there's good reasons why that's a pretty good definition of atheism. Most atheists, especially the ones that are involved in discussing it, obviously they have more than just a lack of belief, that they've considered these issues and they have a more active disbelief. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that I think that really, if you have any criticisms of religion and you're out there making those criticisms and you see some motivation to making those criticisms, that largely, although we might basket that under atheism, I think that's an aspect of anti-theism. Now, it might not be enough to have you label yourself an anti-theist, but effectively this is what it is. This is part of anti-theism. It's not necessarily part of atheism, which doesn't really take a position on whether it's good to believe in God, etc., etc. The second thing that
I'm not sure that I completely understand what you're saying there. When I'm talking about anti-theism, Richard Dawkins came out and talked about militant atheism during, I think it was a TED talk, and that is what I am saying when I'm talking about anti-theism. Militant atheism, the whole idea that religion is child abuse and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, but look. I can't say that and say that that isn't anti-theism, the same as I can't look at the stance of the Soviet Union back in the day and say that that isn't anti-theism, because of course it is. But that's not the limits of anti-theism, right? And this is what we need to look at. So, for example, this comes to the other point that I was going to make, the other precursor point, which is this idea that, and again, you haven't suggested this, but I've had this thrown at me before, that an anti-theist is somebody who wants to kill everybody who believes in God, or stamp out religion, or disabuse people of their religious belief. And some people do agree with one of those things. That certainly isn't my point. I mean, from my perspective as an anti-theist, that's the very last thing that I want to do. What I want to see is more of an evolution towards a less religious society that happens organically, right? And if I can aid that process slightly along the way, then that's not a bad thing. But
you don't know that, though.
Well, no, that's
my
that's fine. That's fine, and that's where we've got to start clashing our ideas together on that one. But
am I jumping in too quick here?
No, not really. But I think this is an important thing to differentiate right from the word go.
Totally,
because then when you look at societies that you would regard as atheistic, perhaps you have societies like you would see in the Soviet Union or the communist states that are they are atheistic states. By decree they are atheistic states, but actually the population is often quite religious still. Whereas then you have other countries which it's quite amusing really, because you'd be talking especially in Northern Europe, Scandinavian countries and the UK, which often actually still have a state religion, right? But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's obviously of the Denmark, I believe, Sweden, I think they both still have state religions. The UK obviously has a state religion, the Church of England, and yet they have very, very high levels of disbelief and of irreligiosity, because obviously they're slightly different things. So these are very different things, and the former is something that is imposed upon people as is, people that already have a religious conviction, whereas the latter is something that is developed generation on generation. So you get this situation where you have people who lose their religion, right? And they'll say something like, I've thought about it all, I've decided that there's no God, but there's a kind of God-sized hole well, maybe not a God-sized hole, because that would be, I suppose, an infinitely large hole. But yeah, let's say a God-shaped hole. You know,
that would
which
be
is
dead.
Yeah. It would be pretty critical, wouldn't it? There'd be sort of internal organs splattered all over the place. But they have a God-shaped hole, right? And sometimes then it's drawn so that everybody else who hasn't got a religion, they must have this God-shaped hole. But of course, it's a little bit like having a tumor. Not that I'm suggesting that having religion is quite like having a tumor, but if you had a large tumor in your abdomen removed, you might be told afterwards that this has had to be packed out, and the packing will be withdrawn over a period of time because you've got a tumor-sized void in your abdomen. But we can't draw from that the conclusion that everybody who's never had a tumor has a tumor-sized void in their abdomen, because obviously it's the tumor that's caused that void. So I think that's something that's important to consider. That's what I wanted to add. And then, of course, you've got this list of core claims and assertions of anti-theists, which do you want to present the whole list and then go through them?
Let's talk about the list. First, so this list was...
While you're doing that, I can share the list if you like.
Okay. I put out a question on Twitter to try to get feedback from other people. So there are a lot of claims on this list that are straight from anti-theists. So I got a lot of flack. People were saying that I was straw manning them. And I mean, I am definitely a proponent of not straw manning people. Obviously, I want to steel man your argument.
Yeah.
These are claims many anti-theists make. These are not, there's no anti-theist manifesto out there that we can turn to and say, these are the claims of anti-theists. So hammering out the claims between us, I think is good. And obviously you had said in kind of your opening statement here that you are not really, you know, you don't want to destroy religion, as in we're going to round up all the religious people in concentration camps. That's not, and I do not remotely think that's what anti-theists or militant atheists, as Dawkins calls them, wants either. But you're stepping into a political environment and you're making scientific claims that I believe are inaccurate. And what irks me is that one of the reasons why I am a skeptic and consider myself a member of the non-skeptic community or skeptic community or whatever we're calling it is because I am a rationalist. I believe in rational thought. And I honestly think the scientific studies that people are doing now and the scientific evidence is turning against a lot of these claims that anti-theists are making. So for me, I'm looking at anti-theists like just the new religion on the block.
Yeah.
And it bugs me. It really bugs me. So, and the people, I shared this list a second time on Twitter, and a lot of anti-theists chimed in and they wanted to change it around. I got some people that were giving me screenshots of their modifications to the list. And well, I mean, I respect all of those modifications. Some people take it further than other people, but a lot of these claims and assertions are really decorations for number 5, and nobody really had a problem with number 5. And number 5 is the one, even I mean, I got to admit, Noel, I've been watching your videos for 10 years. I was there when Thunderfoot was beating up on Venom Fang X. I mean, I was sharing I mean, that was a beautiful thing. Okay. But when I'm reading The God Delusion, when I'm reading Sam Harris or Hitchens or any one of those, number 5 is the one that I always have in my head because I am a true skeptic and I want to know the truth. That is what matters to me. And religion does more harm than good. I have never felt the atheists or the anti-theists or whatever you want to call them. I never feel that they've made their burden of proof. They live in this world where the burden of proof is on you because you're making the claim, and that works great with the Christians, but now they are making claims. Religion does more harm than good is an affirmative claim that you need evidence to back up.
I mean, I certainly won't dispute that. And I mean, it's something that I've always stood by. I've said that, look, the things that you're asking me to evidence, and I don't mean you, I mean in conversations with theists, generally are not atheistic claims I'm making. It's claims that that arise as a result of my anti-theism. That's effectively what you're asking me to evidence, and I have no problem trying to do that. Right, I have no problem trying to make a claim because I wouldn't be an anti-theist if I didn't feel, at least within myself, I could be wrong, but if I didn't feel within myself that there are reasons that I can give, and hopefully we can get through some.
No, and people always do give me those reasons, but they're anecdotal reasons. They're anecdotal reasons. There are people that are out there that have devoted their lives to researching this subject. David Sloan Wilson is one of them. Jonathan Haidt is another one of them. So giving me a bunch of anecdotal evidence is the same exact thing that the religious people are doing. Religious people, we've said it for millennia, the atheists have said it. They point out the hits and they ignore the misses. Yeah, right.
Can I just say though, with regard to the anecdotal evidence claim, I think it's important to differentiate between two bits. You can have a philosophical and scientific conjecture about what societies would be like if they largely abandon religion, and you can have anecdotal evidence, but there's something in between that, which is that really this isn't just conjecture, because we do have societies now which are largely non-religious, right? Or certainly in the way that they function, they're functionally not religious.
Right.
So we have examples, and drawing things from that and experiences from that isn't anecdotal evidence.
No, it's not, but its correlation does not equal causation. And the fact that these places have strong institutions that have taken the place of religion doesn't necessarily mean that religion is not functioning in the background as an engine driving those institutions. You're talking about eliminating an entire institution without necessarily knowing the ramifications.
I think, yeah. I mean, look, we're getting onto some of the stuff that Haidt was talking about in the chapter that I read that was relevant. But I think you've got to be careful here. He doesn't dispute this modular approach, as I understand it. He still accepts that. But he says, So what I would say to you is you cannot then down the line start just viewing religion as a take it all together. That it's got to be done as the only thing that you could replace Catholicism with would be a facsimile of Catholicism. If you can still tick all those boxes, right, but without it being any relevance to deity. Yeah, yes, exactly. Then I don't see that the issues really arise.
We're probably losing our people who are listening, and thanks for joining us in the chat. You want to hammer through the list first so we can get to the claims
let's do that. Right. So can I say in terms of it, let's just deal with 7 first, can we? Because for 7, religion brings out the worst in people. Let's just get that out of the way, because I don't subscribe to that. So I'm not going to try and defend that. I can't even think of an aspect of that I particularly want to defend. Does it bring out the worst in people? Yes, it does, but it can bring out the best in people. Some people.
Okay. Oh my God! Some people said something that many anti-theists will never say.
We know that there are some people that have gone off the rails and they're, killing grandmothers and stuff. Yeah, they're killing grandmothers and mutilating babies and all this kind of shit. Maybe not quite that extent, but they're doing this stuff. And then they find God. Somebody, some priest takes them in there and they find God.
But you do have some Gandhis and you do have some Martin Luther Kings.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, they're not the only things that can do it. Boxing clubs do the same thing with angry young men. There's lots of other ways. So there are secular alternatives. But yeah, obviously, it doesn't always bring out the worst in people. It can also bring out the best in people. And there's lots of other things. I mean, sport can bring out the best in people, but it can also, with a football violence that we had here in the 70s and 80s, that can bring out the worst in people as well. So I'm just not really interested in that one. It's not a good argument, and it's certainly not one I would make as an assertion.
Okay, gone.
Number 5.
Just for people listening, it's religion brings out the worst in people. Number 7. We're nixing that. We're not even
get rid of that one. I just wanted to say about 5, because I think a lot of the others are then the bits that chime into 5. So do I subscribe to 5? Yeah, I mean that is probably, as you say, that is the key one on that list. But I don't think it's necessarily whether it does more harm than good, because you've got almost like a kind of Stockholm syndrome effect, whereas for people that are already religious, right, it might be doing more good than harm to remove the religion at that point that you're 40 years old and you've relied upon your faith for 40 years.
Interesting.
It might be doing more good than harm, but that doesn't mean that if you'd never had that religion that you'd still be in that same position. So you've got to bear things like that in mind. You know, religion creates its own need within society, I think.
Were you socialized in a religion?
Not at all. Couldn't have been any less religious. I mean, I actually, it's not something I'd ever discuss with my mother because it's not the kind of thing that she discusses. But she's just a non-religious person. My father, well, he always called himself an agnostic, and he always said I had to make my own mind up and all this kind of thing. I said to him at the age of 6 that I didn't believe in God. So I've always been a little bit more. Not necessarily hardline, because I'm not especially hardline on it, you know, but I've always been a bit more certain in my mind than he has with his. But the society I live in, I mean, this is the interesting thing, and it'd be interesting to know about the society you live in, because how that shaped your view of this, because the society I live in couldn't be any less religious. Do I know some people who believe in God? Yeah, they do. If you ask them, some of them will say, yes, they believe in God. But if you ask them about their Christianity, they'd say, well, yeah, Jesus is the Son of God. And I think there's a New Testament and an Old Testament. And that's about it. They'll only have ever gone to church for a wedding or a funeral, and that'll be it. Right. So the cohesive elements of it are just utterly null and void. The morality aspects of appeals to authority of God is null and void. Effectively, they're not religious. They would claim to have a religious belief, but it doesn't impact on their lives in any way. You know,
a lot of anti-theists will present as evidence that there are a lot of places in the world that are just terrible places to live, like Sierra Leone, or you think of any third world country, and they'll talk about how they're completely religious there and almost blame the religion, their religiousness, or blame the fact that it's a terrible place to live on the fact that they're religious. But I think the causal relationship there is completely backwards. People turn to religion because it's the last hope of order. And if you live in a place where you have strong institutions, you have universal health care, you have security, safety, you have good police force, you have good courts where you can arbitrate disputes. Of course, like religion is going to wane in that kind of atmosphere because you have all of these other strong institutions that are keeping order. So to look at these places that are total shitholes and say, oh, they're shitholes because they're religious, just seems completely
possibly so. I mean, I just started watching The Walking Dead actually with my wife. It's just something we watch a couple of episodes every night. And we're up to about season 3, episode 3 or 4 now, and you know, I can see more of a role for religion and in a society when society's broken down like that, and you're in need of those cohesive social structures because they're not going to be replicated by other things.
Right, exactly.
But we have a lot of alternatives now, and this is one of the important points for me. But shall we start working our way through this?
Sure, let's do it. We've dealt with 7. You want to go back to 1, or are we jumping around?
Yeah, bollocks to it. Let's go to 1. Let's be a bit chronological at least with this.
So the world would be a better place without religion. Religion is the cause of many of the world's ills: war, climate change denial, curbing personal freedom, etc. Without religion, these things would go away. So obviously, that's probably the far end of that's a heavy claim there.
Yes,
a lot of people wanted to walk that claim back. They say the world would probably be a better place without religion. But I feel like, well, then why are you even making the claim? And what is your evidence for probably? Like, and what is the probability? Let's talk about it. Is it 80%? Is it 40%? I mean, I'm a scientific thinker here, so.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I look at all these things. Effectively, you've got 3 very different things there, which makes it a really interesting claim. As you say, with religion, would these things go away? Of course they wouldn't go away, but I do think they're important points. You know, do I think these things would be better without religion? And I do, each one in a slightly different way. So for example, let me give you an example, right, for each one. So with war, you know, it's a difficult thing when you're talking about what causes war, and I'm no great student of history, right? But most wars that have taken place, religion may have been a factor, but wars are generally fought over land and resources and many other things.
Resources.
Right. So these things would probably be taking place anyway. It's another aspect of friction, perhaps, and sort of with the troubles in Northern Ireland, something that people will rally around in terms of that. But I don't think the wars are caused by religion. But what I do know is, if you look back at something like, for example, the situation during the Cold War, right, and the mutually assured destruction and the situation we had there, one thing that was a crumb of comfort, I propose, for most of us in the West back in the day, was that we assumed that the likes of Nikita Khrushchev or Leonid Brezhnev were rational actors in this, that they didn't want to die, right? That they didn't believe that 72 virgins or a Valhalla waiting for them at the other end. And something that was often said back in the day, which I'd still subscribe to, is I'd rather the Russians have a huge stockpile of nuclear weapons than the Iranians or somebody like that. Why? Because we're not quite so certain that if you have a strong religious devout mindset and believe there might be something waiting for you as a reward for that kind of glorious destruction, that it makes you a rather more dangerous individual, you know. So if you take away the religion, I don't know whether you take away the war aspect, but I'd certainly feel a little bit more certain about the mutually assured destruction aspect of having standing armies, nuclear arsenals, etc., etc.
I think people are I do not believe people are rational beings in and of itself. So my position is, if you take away religion, that their irrationality will express itself in other ways. And just, I feel like religion evolved to contain that irrationality in ways that are more productive than just some random way that we think of here in the current year. So I think
to answer what I said, would you feel any more fear, or if the Iranians, for example, had the Russians' nuclear arsenal, would it not add an element of fear to you? Or would you think, no, they're not bothered about dying any more than the God-denying Russian leaders would be?
I think religion is a post hoc construction. So I think the motivations are basically evolutionarily based motivations. Status for one is a huge one. I don't think it helps any. I don't, just to cut to the chase. No, I don't. Okay. I don't think what you're saying doesn't worry me. It doesn't worry me that they, you know.
Yeah. So your conclusion would be different to mine on that one. There's probably nothing I can say that would appeal to you there.
Well,
you know, if you don't,
you're talking about a third world dictator. A third world dictators. I don't know if you've read Dictator's Handbook or know about selectorate theory, but a lot of my thinking is influenced by that book. So I think they're more interested in maintaining power and status, and dictators don't fight hard at war. They don't, not as hard as Democrats do. So
yeah. I mean, the reason I mentioned Iran, and I didn't mention something like Saudi Arabia, is that I believe that probably the House of Saud probably isn't as religious as its population is. Yeah. I mean, it's interested in power and maintaining it, and it uses Wahhabism as a sort of tool for controlling everybody. So I'm a bit cynical about that, but
I think it uses the guns as a tool to control everybody, and people turn to Wahhabism because they live in such terrible, destitute environment.
So I was interested on the climate change denial one. Obviously, climate change denial wouldn't go away without religion, but there is a link between climate change denial and religiosity. You know, statistically within the United States, I've got a, where are we here? Look, if I throw this,
you're sharing your screen on my screen over here.
I am. I'm sharing my screen on everybody's screen, I think. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good.
So ultimately, there we have the where are we? The net unaffiliated human activity 64%. White evangelicals right at the other end of the scale. Only 28% of them put that down to human activity, and it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because one of the fundamental tenets of Christianity is this thing about stewardship of the earth.
Are you a
sorry?
Are you a vaccination person, or are you an anti-vaxxer?
Oh, vaccination. Yeah.
Okay, so you believe in vaccination. There are anti-vaxxers who are predominantly on the left, who are generally atheistic. Why are they anti-vaxxers if religion? Because they don't have religion in their life. Why are they anti-vaxxers?
Well, I don't know, but it didn't say anti-vax. It said climate change denial. So I thought.
No. I understand. I'm just you're saying there's a link between religion and climate change denial.
No. Look, I made a video not that long ago called "Science versus Progressivism." The point that I was making is that I'm seeing the same thing with certain groups on the left, which is the things that I've seen on the right, the religious right in the United States, the creationism, climate change, the views on these things, I'm now seeing mirrored on these other groups. So yes, I'm not saying they can't be mirrored elsewhere, but that doesn't dispute the link between climate change denial. Well,
if there is no religion, and there are still people believing wacky things.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that it's I dispute that there is a link between. I believe that they may be grouping together under a religious banner, and because one person believes climate change isn't real, they all believe climate change isn't real, but that banner could be something other than religion, and a lot of times that banner is political.
Some of it is very linked to religion. I read something here on this. Representative Tim Wildberg told constituents last week at a town hall in Coldwater, Michigan. What he said was, as a Christian, I believe there is a creator in God who is much bigger than us. And I'm confident that if there's a real problem, he's talking about climate change, he can take care of it. So God's going to take care of it. And later on in the same article, it was talking about, this was in the Washington Post, it was talking about evangelicals, because I was interested in this. I looked this up just the other day because it's always something that seemed odd to me. This idea of Christian stewardship. Why would Christians be playing effectively Russian roulette, saying unless you can absolutely prove definitively that it's human activity, we'll assume the next chamber doesn't have the bullet in it and carry on regardless? It seems a little bit reckless. And there was a lot of talk. I give you some examples in this article of it being linked to the Antichrist, right? That the position is amongst some evangelicals that this is the Antichrist trying to influence what we do and create a world government, that it's the devil trying to create a world government. This is religious thinking behind that. So I can't help but think that if the United States was a less religious country, that there would be less climate change denial within the United States. Is that something that you would dispute?
I would, and it goes back to why the way people think. Atheists and anti-theists a lot of times think people are rational beings, and I just don't believe that. I think the work of Daniel Kahneman with Thinking Fast and Slow, and the work of Jonathan Haidt. There's a couple other researchers, I don't have them on the screen right now, but they have this idea that we're really driven, our motivations come from post hoc or come from unconscious intuitions, they call them. We generally call them emotions. And that we are social beings and we make decisions based on our social group. And then we justify those decisions after the fact, and we justify those decisions in ways that our social group will accept. And religion is one of those ways, but it's really difficult to say what the motivations are for various people. You've heard the saying, every man has two reasons, right? A good reason and the real reason.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's difficult for me to say that, and you've experienced this in dealing with people. People don't change their minds, right? People, you present facts and evidence to them, and they don't change their minds. They don't change their minds because they have a core intuition about the way the thing is, and that core intuition. They're just going to substitute another excuse for the religion if religion is gone.
Yeah, I don't know whether I quite agree. Where I disagree with that was when you say about people not changing their minds. I think people do change their minds, but what you don't have is people who are heavily invested. We are two individuals now, right? With this discussion we're having here, we're heavily invested in this. So it's almost beyond the realms of possibility that at the end of this hangout, either of us are going to go, well, do you know what? I've been talking bollocks for the past hour and a half, right? That's unlikely to happen.
Well, you would be saying I've talked bollocks for the past 10 years, though, and that's impossible to do.
Exactly. So what I have experienced is that people who have less investment, they've maybe internal investment, but they've not, other people don't know about it. They've thought about the issues, but not really spent so much time talking about it. It's easier for them to change their mind. And they're going to
make that investment elsewhere, though. They're going to make that investment in the Republican Party, and what I think, things are not going to change.
What my experience of people who have made that investment, and that includes some religious people on YouTube, is that people withdraw for a period of time. It seems to me that there's too much loss of status in one day saying I believe in God and the next day saying actually I don't, than there is compared to saying I believe in God, disappearing for 6 months and then coming back and sort of reinventing yourself and saying I've had a big change of heart over the past 6 months. Let me tell you.
Do you really? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I've seen
that's a tricky thing to do.
It is. It's a big thing to do. It is a big thing. And
there are a lot of people changing from liberal to conservative overnight. And like us as a social group are like, bullshit, they're a fraud.
And sometimes they are, but this is why, you know, when we're talking about the world being a better place without religion, I mean, I know because I've made several videos on the stats in the United Kingdom, very few people change, because very few people lose their religion, I should say, or the belief in God. Or if they are, they're doing it in the same rate that people are picking it up. What happens is that each group that comes up, if you look cohort on cohort, every group is less religious than the one that preceded it. Every group has less belief in God than the one that precedes it. So you can see the way the trend's going in the United Kingdom, and I can tell you where it will be in 20 years' time, purely by dint of the fact that the most religious groups will be dead. You know, very few people are actually changing their minds on those things. But I do find it odd that, you know, to me it seems a cut and dried case that the groups within the United States that are biggest on climate change denial are the religious groups.
Yeah, but correlation does not equal causation. It does not equal causation.
Yeah. So what else then within their life?
This is why I made the anti-vax analogy, because the anti-vaxxers are generally atheistic, but they still believe like wholeheartedly that vaccines are going to kill your kid. Like, despite all the scientific evidence against that, and they don't have why do they believe that?
I would happily accept. I mean, I haven't seen the statistics on that,
the only thing they're missing is the fact to say, you know, they don't have the luxury of saying, hey, God told us that vaccines would kill our kids. Yeah. They don't have that excuse, but they still believe it intuitively.
Yeah. That maybe brings us on to the next one, actually, in terms of, well, God told us to do it, because the next one was curbing personal freedom. I'll just let me bring the list back up just so that people can see what we're talking about.
Did you pull out quotes to this? Is awesome. I didn't know you were going to do that.
Well, only with a couple of it, just simply because, like, for example, on that on the business of climate change denial, it just occurred to me when I read that, I thought, actually, why are the religious denying climate change? Given that they were talking about Christians who should be showing stewardship to the planet, why are they so resistant to that? Why would they play Russian roulette with the planet? So I just kind of interested in that. So then I thought, yeah, let's just print that out. Curbing personal freedom then. So this is, would the world be a better place without religion in terms of curbing personal freedom? What I wanted to say, honestly, with regard to personal freedom, I couldn't give a crap. If you want to walk around with a sack over your head, walk around with a sack over your head. If that's literally what it is, you know, if you want to deny yourself wanking, crack on with it. I really couldn't give a damn about that. I give a damn when it reflects on other people. If you don't want to have a blood transfusion, don't have a blood transfusion. But if you don't want your kids to have a blood transfusion, it's going to keep them alive, then I'm bothered. If you're pressuring your wife or your sister or other women in your group to cover themselves from head to toe in what looks like a fucking bin liner, then I've got a problem with that. But where I have an even bigger problem, though, is when it then becomes on the societal level, and this is where you get issues like, for example, abortion, which is obviously a big one here.
That's the one that I was thinking of, and I didn't say it.
I mean, the thing is, I understand. I understand. If you said to me, the argument that's made towards a religious is, well, look, you don't have to have an abortion, so why can't we all just sort of accept you have your beliefs, we have ours, so if this non-religious person wants to have an abortion, what business is it of yours? But that's, for me, putting myself in the shoes of a religious person, I understand, right, why if you genuinely believe what some religious people believe about abortion, then I can understand why that's unsatisfactory. But the same as saying to me, we're having a new law that allows parents to kill their children up until the age of 5. Now, don't worry about it, Jim. You don't have to kill your child, but don't deny other people the right. That wouldn't be acceptable to me. So if I had the views that they had with regard to the unborn children and ensoulment and all this, then I might feel motivated the way that they are. To get involved and say, well, I'm sorry, my religion is about everybody, and I am going to try and impose my religious beliefs because I fundamentally think that you are wrong. So it's not so much about curbing personal freedom, but it's the fact that it impacts on everybody else as well, and it's impacting on me, right? So you're asking me, why would I be an anti-theist? It's because this crap, and as far as I'm concerned, with the let's call a spade a spade. It's crap. It's a belief that's based on crap, is impacting upon me.
Right. So the thing that the problem that I have is that religion is the way that people justify a feeling, and the intuition is abortion is wrong. The same way that the intuition for a lot of atheists is forcing women to cover up from head to toe is wrong. That's an intuition. It's not based on a religion, correct?
Well, yeah, I don't think you can separate the two, really. It's like trying to separate nature, nurture, and trying to pick out what's been caused by what, because you're talking about adults now, and I'm sure most of the time religious people aren't sort of sitting there. And so, it is intuitive, but it's intuitive as a result of growing up with these religious ideas.
But you said you didn't grow up with religion, and you have intuitions about right and wrong, correct?
Of course I do. Yeah. You still have. Of course I do, because you don't
have the luxury of.
I believe we have innate components. I'm not sort of a blank slatist.
Sure. Okay. But so do you have any? What is your intuition about people forcing women to cover up from head to toe?
What is my intuition about that? Well, I mean, I can
tell you what I think. Or what?
No, well, I can tell you what I think, and I can't. You're asking me to say, is it definitely an intuition? Because I have given it a lot of thought as well. So, yeah,
thinking. What is that thinking?
It goes against what I stand for. Yeah.
Okay, so but since you don't have religion, you can't say, okay, I know this is wrong. I feel this is wrong. Now I have to find a way to justify that. I have to find a way to convince other people that it's wrong because I know it's wrong. Like, people that turn to religion are just looking for a justification for things in their gut that they feel are wrong. I don't have a gut intuition about abortion being wrong. I have a gut intuition about abortion being wrong if we're talking about like late term abortion, for heaven's sakes. I mean, if the woman is 7 months pregnant and she's getting an abortion, for goodness sake, sorry. Like, don't let that happen, right? But that's just an intuition.
But what you're saying,
like the Spartans would have said, okay, carry on, have your abortion at 8 months.
But I'm not really sure what you're saying here, because it would be a spectacular fluke, right?
I'm saying that those intuitions,
just intuitively stripped of their religion, they just have this intuition that abortion is wrong, just happen to be the ones who are religious, and the ones that intuitively, regardless of religion, just happen to think that abortion is okay, just happen to have grown up as not religious. I mean, clearly the religion that you're growing up in is playing a part in developing your position on something such as abortion.
Because of your social group, not necessarily because of the religion.
But that's part of the aspect of it, isn't it?
I'm focusing on if religion was gone, those intuitions would still exist.
They might do, but they wouldn't be the ultimate appeal.
You're saying if you got rid of religion, those intuitions wouldn't exist. And I'm just saying, think about that statement. That's laughable.
No,
those intuitions evolved over millions of years. Yeah. They're not going anywhere.
But those intuitions that abortion is wrong clearly aren't that strong, because most people who lose their religion, certainly in the United Kingdom, most people who've lost their religion and across Western Europe don't hold that opinion. They have a much more nuanced and complex. They can develop a more nuanced and complex perspective
without religion. Yeah, without religion holding them back.
There isn't this God saying in the background. It doesn't matter. This is the thing, Adam, is that you can have these debates with somebody who's religious about abortion, and they will make all these secular arguments, but they're making the secular arguments to try and convince you. Ultimately, you can win every one of those arguments with them. You can convince them, but ultimately, to just paraphrase it, God thinks it's wrong, so it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, God's not particularly keen on abortion, so that undercuts everything else.
Some of the nuance here is, and there are people that I totally agree with you, will change their minds because they don't have an intuition about abortion, and they're just they're saying, I am in a social group that forbids abortion, and if I don't give the right answer, I'll be an outcast in my social group. So therefore, I'm going to give the right answer, even though I don't necessarily have that intuition.
And some of these things do change quite quickly. I mean, I showed the statistics recently on since the gay marriage legislation 2013 in the UK. There's been a huge change because the religious groups were really the groups in opposition to that.
Right. They were the ones with the intuition, and they were forcing their intuition on others socially.
They were, yeah. But they've gone from, in the space of about was it sampled then in 2016, I think. I think the data is 2016, in the British Social Attitudes Survey. Within the space of 3 years, they'd gone from an acceptance rate of about 30%. They might be slightly off these numbers, but from an acceptance rate of about 30% up to about 55%. And actually, Catholics was even greater than that. Surprisingly, Catholics you'd expect to be more resistant than Christians generally in the UK. It was even greater change amongst Catholics. So they'd gone from a position of being mainly in opposition to being mainly for. Having said that, 45% of Christians in the UK don't believe in God. So it's a sort of
it's a social thing for them. Anyway. So there's not a lot of social pressure there.
It's not even a social thing for a lot of them. It's just a label, because they're not going to church. They're not involved in any religious grouping or any religious arrangements. It plays no function in their life. They just tick the box. Yeah, I'm a Christian.
Okay.
So it's a kind of strange thing. So anyway, we've got all these different things. And do I think that they would go away? No, but I do believe that.
So you do not agree with number one, then?
I don't agree. Think these things would go.
So you're saying none of those things would change if really?
No, they change. Oh, they change. Yeah, they'd all change.
Change.
I think that the idea. I don't think there'd be less war necessarily. I don't know on that. I'm absolutely agnostic on that. But I do think that the idea. I feel safer with regard to war, in that I feel that there's a greater degree of rationality amongst the players involved without religion. Climate change denial, I think, would reduce. I don't really feel any doubt about that it would reduce without religion, because people are linking it to their religious beliefs. The more religious you are, seemingly in the United States, the more likely you are to deny climate change. In terms of curbing personal freedom, I don't really give a crap about that. It does curb personal freedom. I'm sure it does. But that's up to you. That's your business. That's not impacting. All this is about really effectively making the world a better place for me,
Yeah.
And but it doesn't just curb personal freedom. It curbs everybody else's freedom. That's the problem. Maybe that links in with sort of number two, because do you want to introduce number two? And
so, but you're taking number one back to a much less significant claim. You're saying that without religion, these things would change. They'd change 10%. They'd change 90%. What do you? How much do you think they'd change?
I couldn't. I'm not putting a number.
Okay.
I mean, and it's hard to put a number on it anyway, because.
So you're not going to die on the hill.
Look, religion isn't just one thing, and different. To use Dawkins' expression, different strains of religion impact in different ways. So I can't really.
There would be. Do you subscribe to Dawkins' idea that religion is child abuse? Because we would end the child abuse at least.
I think, is religion child abuse? I mean, that's almost, I mean, he's hyperbolizing it to make a point, I think, right? Which is,
I don't think he was.
Yeah.
I do not think Dawkins was using hyperbole when he said religion is child abuse. He seemed very serious.
Yeah, but I don't think he wants to. He doesn't want to treat people who bring their children up as Catholics or Muslims in the same way as if they were buggering them, right? You know, this isn't. It's not trying to find there's some kind of equivalence there.
I know.
I understand the point he's making. I mean, you should, from my perspective, bring your children up, not in terms of things like this. I mean, obviously, in terms of morals, you have to give your kids a bit of a path, right? You can't just allow them or just work it all out for yourself. That's a dereliction of your duties. But I do think in terms of things like this, to try and tell your children what you believe, but allow them to work it out for themselves is the gold standard, I would say.
I think specifically Dawkins was saying lying. He was, I believe his thinking is lying to children, and he believes religious falsehoods are a big problem. He thinks lying.
They're not lying. You see, you're not lying to your children, right? Religious people are not lying to their children because they genuinely believe it.
Right.
And this, I think this.
I will be lying to my children because I will be making it up.
I mean, this chimes in with number 4, that religion is based on a lie and honesty is the highest moral value.
Do you want to move to number 4 since we're talking about it already?
Talking about that, yeah, because it's not a lie. This is a sort of play on words. It's based on a lie. I don't think religious people are lying. If religious people genuinely were lying, if the religious communities was full of people that didn't believe any of it, but just claimed that they did, then okay, you could sort of claim. I don't know whether honesty is the highest moral value. I don't know about that, but I think honesty is perhaps something to value and respect, but it isn't. Religious people aren't lying. They genuinely believe it. Now, you could say something similar to this, which is kind of what this is aiming at, is that I think that truth has value, right? And the idea of having a society, I find it deeply depressing. Your sort of view of the world here, that we'd be better off keeping religion, and presumably in 50,000 years, we still have to keep believing things, effectively believing in Santa Claus if it makes us better. That to me is seriously depressing.
I'm not advocating that we keep religion. I just think that it's a huge waste of time trying the path that the anti-theists are on. I just think is a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things that it's always interested me with the United States is that, and it's hard for me to put myself in a position of atheists in the United States because it's such a different environment, but there's such a big push there, or there certainly was at one point, that we need to get together, we need to push atheism, we need to drive forward. And I understand that there are social reasons why atheism perhaps needs a voice in the United States, because it gets a bit of a bad deal and a bad rap in certain areas. I believe that there are there's no people in Congress that are openly atheist, and yet there must be people there who are atheists just purely by the numbers. So I can understand that, but the experience of Western Europe is that none of that is necessary. The experience of Western Europe is that just of its own accord, effectively, religions start to die away, you know. So anti-theism tends to take a more strident approach there, I think. And maybe
because of these beliefs and claims. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, well, possibly, but it's when you're talking about anti-theism in general, you know, you're talking about two different things in a way, because you're talking about what people are actually going out there and doing, and you're talking about what we're talking about now, which is just the base claims that would underpin that, right? Which is, do you think the world would be a better place with less religiosity and less belief in God? And that doesn't necessarily motivate you to go out there and start shouting at people who believe in God, telling them they're all a bunch of cunts. You know, that's a separate thing, right. I think, and it needs to be dealt with separately. So, do I think it's a lie and honesty is the highest moral value? No, I don't think it's a lie and honesty is a moral value. But I think that religion is false. I think the claims that it is making are fundamentally not true. and that I value believing the truth. I mean, if we don't, what's the point with anything? What's the point with our scientific endeavors, right? And I don't mean the scientific endeavors that have that have utility to our lives, engineering utility, like designing a better oil well or whatever. What I mean is endeavors like trying to find out whether there's life on other planets, for example. What's the point? Why not just believe what we want to believe? We value the truth. We value knowledge being accurate for its own sake.
So some people just want to have families and reproduce and fall in love, and they don't care about life on other planets or the truth or any of that stuff. So
I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you. And this is one of the things where talking about,
I mean,
yeah.
So one of the reasons why I think that it's just a waste of time is because I think 80% of the population is going to do the godding thing, and 20% of the population is going to be upset about it. And I just feel like those numbers are kind of, for whatever reason, just genetically encoded into society. So I really feel like that's why I feel like a lot of this stuff is just a waste of time. I mean, it is extremely entertaining, but taking pot shots at the 80% of the people that are going to have religiosity and enjoy religiosity and want to live their lives with religiosity. I just don't see how trying to motivate those people to come to our side is not the exact same thing the religious people are doing when they're trying to motivate atheists to come to their side.
Oh, I mean, it is in many ways. Yeah, it's proselytizing the same way as Christians and Muslims proselytize, which in some ways is kind of ironic, really, because
very ironic.
To champion religion within society is to champion proselytization, because the two religions that dominate are both proselytizing. So it's sort of like, from my perspective, what you're saying is that you're championing proselytization, but don't proselytize against it, because that's the situation. There's proselytization on both sides.
Yes.
I think some of this links back actually to number 2, and the answer that I'd give to some of what you were saying there links back to number 2. So,
okay.
Shall we go?
Religion promotes, encourages, and sustains irrational thinking and behavior. Without religion, people will think rationally. This is Sam Harris's argument.
Yeah. I mean, there are philosophical implications for this, and obviously the scientific implications. I'll just stop screen sharing that now. People have read that. So, but I think there's also some there is evidence of this, right? Because, like I say, in societies such as the United Kingdom, we're largely already there. Belief in God is down at 32%.
And you think irrational thinking is down to?
Well, this is what I was going to say. So if you look at the statistics in the United States, I rechecked the statistics in the United States because the question's worded a little bit differently. It's Gallup, I think, that's been wording the question. I've got the link, but I haven't got it so I can throw it up. And for a period, they asked the question, do you believe in God or a higher spiritual power? Then they changed it to just, do you believe in God? It didn't actually make very much difference, that. And then they changed it back to asking separate questions and then amalgamating the results. It seems to me that the statistics now, in a form similar to the way we've asked it in the United Kingdom a couple of years back, you would have 80% of people in the United States saying they believe in God, and 10% saying they believe in a higher power, higher spiritual power, but not God. In the UK, you have 32% saying they believe in God, and then it takes it up to about 50% if you add it together for God or a higher spiritual power. So there's a big difference there, right? 30% through to 50% roughly for belief in God, 50 through to 90 for belief in a higher spiritual power. Now, do I think that some of that loss of religiosity and the God aspect of religiosity has been substituted with other forms of irrationality? Woo, the healing power of fucking crystals or stuff like this, right? Or maybe something that has a little bit more social impact. Yes.
What is it with the drops?
I do think that some of it has been replaced by that, but I don't think that all of it has been replaced by that. A lot of people, there are some people, we've all met some people that are just searching for some shite to believe in. There was a guy who used to be on YouTube called Jordan Woods. Woods of Jordan was his channel, and he was I can't remember what brand of Christianity he was. He was sort of evangelical. His father was a preacher, and he had his own channel as well. And he left his religion and he made videos. He was saying, I'm looking for another religion. He became a Muslim at one point. He became a Calvinist at one point. He became a Jehovah's Witness at one point. He was like touting himself around all these different religious beliefs. And it just seems so odd to me that somebody would do that. But people will do that within religion. And you will have other people that, I agree with you, they have that mindset, right? They have that mindset. They need some form of shite to believe in. And again, if it's not God, it's the fucking healing power of crystals. I get that, but it's not 90% of the population. Within that 90% of the population in the United States that believes in God or a higher spiritual power, I don't believe for a second that all 90% of those won't think more rationally if you took away their religion, if they'd been brought up in a less religious society. Because when I look at the population in the United Kingdom, sure, there are people believing in the healing power of crystals and stuff, but these are still very, very minor beliefs. Most people, as you say, they just want to get on with their lives, bring their family up, watch some sport on the TV, or watch X Factor or Britain's Got Talent or some shite that Simon Cowell's created, right? That's what they do. They're not substituting that religion with something else. It's not like there's a void that needs to be filled with something else. It's just gone. And so do I think people will think more rationally? I think the point is, yes, I think that they would statistically, but this is the real thing, right? And I'll give you a chance to retort in a second. I'm sorry for
no, Tick, you're on a roll, man. Keep going.
Well, even if it didn't, right? This is the thing. Even if it within the United Kingdom, all those people that still believe in God lost their belief in God. All those people that still had a religion, whether they believe in God or not, but had some affiliation to religion, lost that. It just brought up something else, right? Maybe a political position. You know, you talked about in one of your things about something like cultural critical race theory, for example, or something like that, right? Or some hardline brand of feminism or something along those lines, or the healing power crystals. Doesn't matter what. The difference is, I'd still be happy. That would still be a win as far as I'm concerned, because within my society, religion has special status. Faith itself is revered. And by faith, I think we sort of mean a sort of level of belief above that which the evidence would lead us to. We're revering faith in itself, which I think is inherently irrational. It's promoting the idea by valuing something, and religion is valued within society, by valuing something which is irrational. We're promoting the idea that irrationality itself, I think, is to be respected. And at the same stage, you know, even though it's a strange relationship we have in the UK with religion, because at the one hand, we see it as sort of morally lagging behind on issues like homosexuality and abortion, and viewed with some suspicion generally within the public sphere, and people sort of, politicians don't like to talk, most of them, too openly about their religion for that fact. At the same stage, we go to bishops for moral, you know, the TV will trot out a bishop as an example of somebody who can give us some kind of moral guidance. It's given this special status, and it actually has state protection. It's a protected characteristic. So if you replace, right, you replace your, let's say I know you're not a Christian, but you replace your Christianity with a belief in the fucking healing power of crystals, or critical race theory or something, or let's say you become a communist or a fascist. These are all ideas. Political ideas do not have the protection that religions have. You put the stamp of religion on it, and all of a sudden you've got a series of protections that woo doesn't have, and that political beliefs don't have. So that's an advantage for me immediately, even if we still have these irrational modes of thought. And the other thing is that a lot of these irrational modes of thought, such as the healing power of crystals, doesn't really influence very much. I mean, okay, fair enough. If you're denying yourself proper medicine and believe that your cancer is going to be cured just by sitting next to a giant fucking crystal, right, then that's impacting on you. But as long as it's just a personal thing, nobody's out there saying we need to close the NHS, we can all just rely on crystals. You know, nobody's imposing those things on other people. So, I mean, I suppose with the anti-vaxxing, you could make a case. But again, it's normally only with their own children. They're not trying to say nobody can be vaccinated. So for me, do I think that people would be more rational? Yes, I think statistically they would. But even if they weren't, Adam, right, I still think it would be a win, because religion has this special status and religious beliefs impact in a way that these other things don't.
That special status that you're talking about is rests on the sanctity foundation. You've read The Righteous Mind. What is your take on sanctity? Do you think sanctity
I haven't read
serves
that.
a valuable?
I haven't read that. So outline the argument.
Well, sanctity is a useful tool in structuring a society. Like, people don't break into other people follow rules because those rules are important, and things that are important rest on the sanctity foundation. So what I hear you saying is a lot of the things that rub you the wrong way about religion are that we say that this is important, that people put stock in it and, you know, rest things on the sanctity of it.
It's more.
There are a lot of good things that
the rest of us.
There are a lot of good things. Well, no one's forcing you to do it. I mean, I am on board. I'm not for theocracies. I think theocracies are horrible. But in Western nations where the religions are, you know, we have freedom of religion, and, you know, they kind of have to compete for members. A lot of the horrible things that religions can do and have done throughout history are kind of stripped away, because, you know, you can't do those horrible things. I mean, the religious group that everyone wants to talk about is the Westboro Baptist Church, but I think they have like 8 people there. Like, no one's knocking at the door to get into the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah.
Like, the big churches are, with the atheist community, you can't even really say anything good about them, but something's going on there, because they're like mega churches with millions and millions of people going. They're getting something out of it. Nobody's forcing them at gunpoint to go on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
My thing is, if it's a voluntary association,
yeah,
obviously they're getting something out of it, and you and I don't get anything out of that, because you and I have we score very low on sacredness or the sanctity foundation. Like, we don't understand sanctity in the same way that these people understand sanctity, and just out of respect for them, I feel like I don't think the rationality will change. I think people are calibrated. Like, they've done studies where, you know, they look at different personality traits, and libertarians tend to be the most rational people out there. But there are people that are irrational, and I don't think they're irrational because religion exists in our society. I think they're religious because they're just irrational people, and they do the godding thing. They enjoy the godding thing. It's like a sense of community for them.
Yeah, which is, look, I haven't got a problem with that, but it's you cannot suggest that religion has the same status as everything else in that respect. I mean, that Jonathan Haidt on his chapter there, he gives an example right at the beginning of going to a sporting occasion. That's absolutely fine, and it fits in with all this cohesiveness and all that. Absolutely brilliant. But that isn't given the same status as a religion, right? You don't have the government. We have a system in the UK of faith schools, and about not quite half, about a third of all state-funded schools. These aren't schools where the church has said, we are going to pay for a school. These are schools that are funded by the state, and they have a religious character. They are run by the Church of England or by the Catholic Church. And there are some towns in the United Kingdom whereby that is the only option you have. Right. You don't have to be, if you're under those circumstances, the school is mandated that it has to allow people outside of that faith to go to that school. But I would have no choice if I'm in that town. I have to send my child to a Catholic school or to a school that's run by the Church of England. Now, the government props that up by looking at these statistics of how many people affiliate with Christianity and say, well, there's still, in the census, it still says 60-odd%, which is effectively, the census is only interested in a cultural affiliation. It has special status in the House of Lords. We have 20 Lords Spiritual. We have 20 bishops that sit in the House of Lords purely by dint of the fact that they're bishops in the Church of England. This is affording these things special status by dint of the fact that they're religions, you know, and that is impacting on all of us.
Well, it's a political question, and those institutions exist because voters are not voting the people out of office who are rubber stamping them, correct?
Well, possibly so, but I think we all grow up. We're growing up. We grow up in a society that has this reverence for religion. And look, when you talk about sanctity, I have no problem reverence for religion if you're part of that religion, right? But it's the fact that everybody's expected to show this reverence.
You don't want to be forced to do it, and I understand that.
You know, you can say to me, you know, it's very difficult. Where does the dividing line a lot of the time? You will. I know I don't have to sell this to you that religion has a political element to it. Right, but if something, if you sell me your belief structure as a political belief, I can say what the fuck I like about it. It's not a protected characteristic. It's not protected under employment law and the Equality Act. It's not protected. It's not protected under hate speech legislation. Whereas in Western Europe, it will be if you can demonstrate that it's a religion. Just stick a God in. It's exactly the same things, but stick a God in the mix. And all of a sudden, it's a protected characteristic, and people have to tread around it a lot more differently, you know. And so, it's not.
You don't have blasphemy laws over there, right? You can talk.
We do still. Was the blasphemy law? I think the blasphemy law was repealed. I think it was one of we had the Equality Act a few years ago with the Equality Act, and what happened is there was Sex Discriminations Act. There was lots of discriminations act, race discrimination acts, and they were all amalgamated into this because the Blasphemy Act only applied to Christianity, you see.
Right.
And obviously with living in a sort of more multicultural society, not that it's, I mean, the Blasphemy Act was like something that was like hardly ever used, you know, so once a decade to be a fucking case with regard to that. That was amalgamated. Yeah.
I want to talk more. All we're really talking about is anecdotal evidence. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation was because they're making claims that religion does more harm than good without, in my eyes, any scientific evidence. Did you bring any?
What would you class as scientific evidence? If I say to you that the discussions that take place in my society are affected by, I mean,
anecdotal evidence.
Religion pushes them off the table. I don't know how you. I don't know how.
Well, I have the thing that convinced me.
Is it anecdotal evidence that the religious, right? I come and I'll show the statistics. For example, I haven't got them to hand, but I've got them on video.
Well, let me before you say this, my claim, the claim that religion does more harm than good. Religion can do 49% harm and be blood and guts and all the things anti-theists believe, and 51% good, creating social capital in society, preventing people, making people happy, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And still be a net positive for society. So I think a lot of anti-theists think that I'm arguing that religion is all hearts and flowers, and I'm not. I agree that there's a lot of shit things, and you're bringing up all those shit things.
What's your evidence?
But you're ignoring.
Okay, well, what's your evidence then that it's been a net positive?
Religion creates social capital.
Yeah, but these are conjectural points. These are philosophical points. It's not actually giving us the hard data, is it?
But they've done the studies, though. They've done the studies on that side. They know that religion causes cohesion in people, and that causes rises in social capital.
Look,
And what
I agree.
society
Look,
doesn't want a rise in social capital?
have
Honesty,
if you
trust,
don't want,
all of that stuff.
If you want rise in social capital, have a war. That'll give you a bigger rise in social capital than anything else. But what I would say is that if you have a war, what you have is a greater need for social capital, right? And it's
the idea behind is not, first of all, obviously, I hope you're being hyperbolic, because I think the war aspect might tip us over to more harm than good. Okay. We're talking about having the good things, right? Keeping the good things maximized and keeping the bad things minimized.
Yeah, but is what
war brings the bad things like off the charts. No.
Well, we would think so. But if what I'm saying is, if you're talking about social capital as a good, for me, it's like the thing with social capital is there isn't a certain level of social capital that you need within a society. The point I'm mentioning with war is,
I think there is, though.
I don't think there is. I think different societies.
Hold on. When in Sierra Leone, when civil war breaks out, that's when social capital is like gone. Nobody trusts anybody, right?
Yeah.
Like there is a certain level of social capital. There's like, I meet you on the street. I have no idea who you are. You're a total stranger. Maybe you're a different race. Maybe you look completely different. Maybe you speak a different language, but I still trust you. I would say, hey, will you, hold my wallet for me? I don't know how much trust you have for a total stranger, but there's that level of social capital. And then there's a level of social capital where, you stay away from people. Like you cross the street when somebody's coming down the street. Like the level of social capital. What's the show that you said you were watching? The Walking Dead. What's the level of social capital in that society?
The level of social capital
pretty low, right?
Society. Well, what I would say with The Walking Dead, that's a perfect example, because that is an example of a society where you need a very high level of social capital because you haven't got structures to replace it. I'm living in a society it's got so many regulatory bodies, so many ombudsmen. It's got these things to cobble fucking dogs with, right? It's coming out of it. These are things that are replacing a lot of the need that we had for social capital. I mean, you talked in one of your questions about diamond traders and the Jewish people dominating that because of the social capital.
Should we move on to the questions? Because maybe.
Okay. Yeah, the only one we haven't touched on, I think, is the mutually agreed upon facts are essential for a functional society. Religion makes this impossible. Which I'll just quickly, we'll do that quickly, and then we can move on to the questions. Okay, because I've got to go in 40. I've got 40 minutes, I suppose, and that's about the limit.
Yeah, let's move on to the questions.
So just on this one, I'd say quickly on this. I don't think mutually agreed upon facts are essential for a functional society. I think that's wrong. And I think that most of the agreements that we have is because we don't agree upon the facts. But yeah, there are different things that we can disagree upon. If you're looking at the sort of secular way in which you could argue about abortion, which would function not in terms of you can have abortion, you can't, but in terms of the development of the brain and the central nervous system, and when do we start to look at the life as functionally a human being, for example. So we can disagree upon the facts of when the central nervous system is functioning in a way that we might regard as human, for example. But we can also argue about the relevance of that fact. You could say, okay, well, I agree with you actually that this is the point for that, but I don't think that's relevant to the deadline, the cutoff deadline for abortion. But the thing is, with all of those things, we can have a discussion. We can discuss those things. I cannot discuss if somebody has a religious position that God says it's wrong. It's all of this thing is irrelevant, right? Because yes, sure, we'll go through the motions. We'll sit there, we'll play nice, and we'll go through the motions of having the discussion. But we're only having that discussion because they want the chance to influence me, right? They want a chance of winning that, because if they win that, I'll be agreeing with them, but for different reasons. I'll be agreeing with let's get rid of abortion for secular reasons, but ultimately their position is, their line in the sand is God's not very keen on abortion. And whatever we argue, so this is the problem I have for a functional society from an atheistic perspective. If everybody was part of that religion, it maybe wouldn't be an issue. But when we have a pluralistic society such as we have now, with lots and lots of different belief structures, people of different religions and people of no religion, it stifles that discussion. That discussion can't really be had in that context.
Okay.
So that's the issue that I would have with that. Shall we go on to these
So Cosmic Skeptic made a video recently using Richard Dawkins' argument about the moth. Are you familiar with this argument?
Yes, I am. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the scientific evidence, there's two competing ideas about what religion is in society. And Dawkins put forward this idea as kind of a hypothesis, and the atheist community just ran with it as if there was any scientific evidence to back it up. And that it feels particularly grating to me, since Dawkins doesn't really do research, and like, as far as I know, there is no evidence, there's no research that's been done to back up his claim, and that's the parasitic meme argument. Yeah. There's been a lot of books written about it. It's an argument, it's a hypothesis, but as scientifically minded people, it's the evidence that pushes those hypotheses over the edge, right?
Yeah.
So there is a competing hypothesis. So just really quickly here,
so this is question 2. We're looking at question 2.
Yeah, question 2.
Which I have to say, if I can just criticize the question in advance, it isn't a question. If you read it, you haven't actually asked a question. You've been one of these people who at the end of one of these debates where they ask the questions and then somebody just reads out the statement and they say, yes, you haven't actually asked a question. Well, well, that's okay.
Well, the wider question really is, what is the like? It just, the Cosmic Skeptic is making a video about this as if this is the truth. Like, he just boldly asserts that because Dawkins said this is how the world is, which is laughable. So Dawkins
I did watch that video by Cosmic Skeptic. I agree with you. I agree with you.
So
it's a limited view.
Yeah, religion. So the Dawkins admits that religions are here, they're widespread. That would imply that they are a evolutionary advantage. And in order to get around the fact that religions are an evolutionary advantage, a positive for society, Dawkins comes up with this idea, the parasitic meme, where humans aren't evolving, humans aren't using religion and evolving. The religions themselves are using humans as a host so that the religions themselves can evolve, and humans are just kind of the zombies for religion, which is, I mean, it's kind of a crazy idea. And I put it on par with the same kind of idea that God exists. Like, it's so laughable to me that our whole entire society, like, human evolution has ceased, and now our whole society exists to spread these parasitic memes called religion. Do you buy into this argument? I have the competing argument here, which makes a lot more sense and is more, I think, more in tune with what this conversation that we're having here. Do you have a take on this parasitic meme argument? And
yeah, I mean, I think to sort of critique it from, I don't, right, let's just say that it's like the argument that he's making here. It's an interesting thing, actually, because I've just lost my Hangout window. Just let me see where it is. There we are. So it's interesting because when we make evolutionary arguments, it's kind of interesting on the wider senses that people make these evolutionary arguments as to what the selection pressures were that have caused something to happen all the time. And it's interesting how they're very rarely questioned until it comes into the sphere of humans. This is sometimes the criticisms that are made of evolutionary psychology, is that these rationales are made. So it's not just the claim that something's evolved, it's why it evolved, as if this isn't a criticism that can be leveled against the whole field of evolutionary biology. Even if you're talking about an arms race between gazelles and cheetahs, that one of them's got faster because the other one's got faster. It's not that part of it actually isn't evidenced. That part of it is conjecture and speculation. We cannot see any other reason why cheetahs don't seem to have some kind of elaborate courtship dance where they show off how fast they can run. So we assume that that's the only possibility, right? So I think this is a general criticism that you're making there. What I would say is that I think that Dawkins, I don't have a lot of time. I think it's very one-dimensional, his take on this. I mean, he's talking in terms of a modular approach, I think. And Haidt talks about that, and he talks about Dennett as well. I thought he was a little bit unfair on Dennett, because having read Dennett's book, Breaking the Spell, Dennett is actually a lot more nuanced than he made him out to be, and actually tackled some of the things that I thought Haidt avoided and needed to tackle.
Well, so you have those. If you can mention them, I'm curious.
Okay, so so
I'm open-minded about this.
Okay, so to try and this was my take on what Haidt had said. So my take on Haidt, and I'll have to sort of just run through it for the benefit of the people watching, is that he took the sort of Dawkins, or as he said, the Dennett position. That there are these modules that maybe this kind of supernaturalistic module, this sort of hypersensitive agency detector thing, where we see agency in things that aren't there, and then maybe you could have another sort of bit where you're effectively, there's an element of wanting to control your environment, but a strong confirmation bias that runs along with that. So you could, you believe that the elements are controlled by agents, and you want to control the elements. The rains should have arrived by now. The rains haven't arrived, so you presume that there's some agency in control of that, so you perform a rain dance, and you've performed a rain dance for 6 days running, and the rains still haven't come, and on the 7th day the rains arrive, so thank God you performed that rain dance. and this is the we know that this is true not just for humans but for other species as well. They have this kind of confirmation bias, and also have this agency where agency isn't involved, but they leave it there. And Haidt said that's really, it's kind of unsatisfying. Actually, Dennett doesn't leave it there, because Dennett talks about why people would accept religion within communities. It can't just work for the priest, it's got to work for everybody. You have to, your explanation has to work for everybody involved. So I thought that Dennett did more than he claimed. But what Haidt seemed to be saying is that you need more modules as well. You need to account for the cohesiveness aspect of religion, and also for sort of the appeal to authority and the moral structure and all this kind of thing. So I suppose you could say there's sort of 4 modules maybe working away there. And he talked about people that had looked at this and then looked at religion in terms of selection on the group level, right? That it's not just a mean,
there we go.
Yeah, this means not, it's not just a mean that's being selected by individuals, but that it can be selected on a group level. I think you can still refer to
this
it
is Atrin, Hendrick, and Sosis is
and you can still refer to it. You still refer to it as a meme. It's still a sort of unit of cultural selection that can be passed on, or that can mutate and evolve.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I have no problem with that. That seems a really, really good argument, and I got that. What I didn't like with Haidt was that then he went back to genes, and he made a point which I agreed with again. He said, well, this is carried on for thousands of years. That's going to involve a selection pressure. Why wouldn't genes respond to that? And I got that, but he wanted to stick at the level of the group, right? He still wanted to make a group selection argument, but now we're not talking about cultural selection. We're talking about genetic selection. And as I understand it, my reading of it is, I'm not entirely against the possibility of group selection, but you have to make, if you're going to have a multi-level selection, which is what you would need, it still has to work on the level of the individual as well as on the level of the group, because individuals can mutate and evolve faster than groups can, right? Individuals reproduce faster
That's
than
not
groups
true,
reproduce.
Though. They would say the opposite, because the group, the cohesiveness of the group is a cultural adaptation, and that cultural adaptation can change faster. I mean, groups can be disbanded and turned into other groups within a generation. It takes generations for genes to change.
But in terms of spreading things, like if you're talking about spreading Catholicism around the world, spreading Islam around the world, and this competition that they're talking about between religions, then that doesn't change with that. That's happening over a long period of time, right? This has happened over centuries. It's not.
They call it gene culture coevolution. Is what it's called.
It's happening over a long period of time. I don't. You always need to have an account, however beneficial something is for a group. You still need to account for freeloaders, and you still need to account for cheats, because
but they're saying that's what religion is very good at.
Nobody as an individual says, look, I think I've probably got the wrong kind of genes here, and it's not going to benefit us, so I'm going to opt out of the reproduction game. And I think my genes are more I'm predisposed to religiosity, so I'll have more children. right?
There is competition going on within the group and between groups. That's not that's so, everyone agrees on that.
Right, so, but he didn't make what Haidt doesn't do is he doesn't make an argument for his case back onto the level of the individual or to the level of the gene, which I think he needed to do, because he needs to account for those factors. That was one of the problems I had with it.
Is it a better story than Dawkins' story?
Well, it was, but I thought it was half a story, and this was the other two. Let me just give you the other two problems I had. I wrote these down because I didn't want to miss.
Is Dawkins' story laughable?
Yeah, well, it is as an entire. It is. Could there be some element of it, right? But possibly,
that's my problem with the story, is that it's like this could be the case, but nobody's ever done any evidence on it, and then atheists are presenting it as it is the case.
Well, he's presenting right.
Santa Claus could come down the chimney and deliver presents to your children. Could. I mean, it is good. They could.
Frank, I like Richard Dawkins, and I've known Richard Dawkins for, not known him as a person, but known him for his work. I've known him from his work long before the God Delusion. You know, I'd seen the Christmas lectures with him, seen episodes of Horizon. He's been on the go for a long time, and I watched him when I was a child. So I've known him for a long time, and he's selecting this argument because he's what he would say is, when you read his books, what he says is, this is the kind of thing. What he usually says, I don't know if he said that with this, but he says this is the kind of thing that could be involved.
This is the way that you justify anti-theism to people. Here, let me give you an argument.
Yeah, but
Cosmic Skeptic, you can go make a video.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
not based on any evidence at all, but you can look
I did watch
into the camera as if it is. You can use my intellectual authority. Like, it's just, it's religion all the way. This is what bugs me about it. It's a new religion.
No, I don't think it's a new religion. But
I'm sorry.
I think it's going too far, because you're bundling everybody in together there. But one thing that he did as well, Haidt, is that he then went on. He's accepting that it's a modular approach, but when he started talking about religiosity, then
the modular approach is you've brought it up a few times, and it's such a small part of the argument. The argument really is that religion binds people into cohesive groups.
Maybe it does, but that's one aspect. That's one module of what religiosity is, and it's important because he starts talking on that chapter.
So what do you mean by the modularity? What are you saying?
I'll explain to you. What he starts talking about, he says these other thinkers, not Dawkins, these other thinkers still accept a modular approach, but they're adding more onto that. But when you add these modules together, then you have something which you could call religiosity, right?
Right. Okay.
But he seems to still accept.
You're saying that the brain calibrates people for certain levels of religiosity, and that religiosity is either useful in the group or not useful.
No, what I'm saying is that it's scratching several itches at once. Let's say Catholicism is scratching the itch of the supernaturalism, of the confirmation bias, of the need for cohesiveness, of the need for and rules.
You don't think if we got rid of religion, though, any of that stuff would go away, right? Confirmation bias isn't going to go away.
Absolutely not. Of course not. No, absolutely not. But this is the point. Haidt then starts discussing it purely at the level of the group level of it being religiosity. But it's still these modules. So the point I'm making is, you don't need, like I said before, you don't need to substitute Catholicism with a facsimile for Catholicism. All you need to do is scratch these individual itches. And the other problem,
institutionally, right?
Perhaps institutionally, yeah. But I mean, you're not necessarily deterministedly setting these things up. The example he gives at the beginning is a brilliant example, but it's a counter example as to why you need religion effectively. He talks about sport gathering and all the things that you might do in that day, and how this is akin to what we do with religion.
I don't think he ever makes the claim that you need religion. I think he makes he's saying that religion serves this purpose evolutionarily.
I'm sure
he's not making the claim.
Absolutely. Well, he says it's descriptive.
Needed.
What I'm talking about is descriptive, and a lot of what I'm saying would equally could apply to fascism or communism or whatever. So yeah, he isn't making a claim that it's necessarily a good thing, just a good thing on that. But what he does do, what I found, a lot of the 2 points I've made, I could sort of live with. What I couldn't live with is that he only seemed to show the positive benefits of religion, and if he'd shown the other aspects and then written them off, that would seem the intellectually honest thing to do. But he doesn't even do that.
What are the other aspects?
The other aspects would be things such as, for example, the Catholic churches, for centuries, his attitude, not just towards heretical thinking, but towards heterodox thinking generally, in the way that it dealt with that. Islam, even today, it was about 10 or 12 years ago now, there was a study amongst British Muslims. 36% of young British Muslims agreed with the statement that the penalty for apostasy should be death. That's young British Muslims agreed that the penalty for apostasy should be death. I don't need to make
it's hilarious.
I don't need to make an analogy to explain to you the benefits that that could have in propagating that religious belief, right? Because it's stopping anybody from defecting away from that religion. It's setting a pretty hardline stance. And in terms of the religion propagating, then what Haidt seems to be saying is it's all due to all these marvelous things, the social code. It's all due to these positives. And yeah, that might play a part, right? I'm on board with that. I'll accept that there's some of that, but there's also these other aspects of religion, you know, with regard to Catholicism and contraception. We're going out there and proselytizing, both with the carrot and with the stick, and the sort of practice of syncretism, and saying, hey, yeah, your beliefs, actually, you've been believing what we believe all along. You've just been doing it in a slightly different way. And let me tell you what you really have been worshipping all this time. All these practices are other things, and some of them are more sinister, some of them are more violent, some of them are things that perhaps we wouldn't want to see carry on within our society. And it doesn't even seem to make any mention within that chapter of those things.
Okay. I'm strictly talking about meeting the burden of proof on religion does more harm than good. So when you're saying that religion does these harmful things, and he does go in other places in the book where religion can be harmful, and he doesn't deny, I don't deny, I don't think anyone denies, like the Catholic priest scandal. Yeah. Like religion does terrible things. Inquisition, like groups can form and do dastardly things in the name of the group. Nobody denies that. The thing is, the anti-theist are making the claims that first of all, those things would go away if religion went away. I'm not certain that that's the case, and also that religion does more harm than good, that those harms outweigh the good stuff that religion will do, and many anti-theists deny that religion does any good.
Yeah, well, I'm not on that position. But when you talk about burden of proof,
so just on the Dawkins versus Atrin, Hendrick, and Sosis, nobody in the skeptic community on YouTube is talking, even if there is a difference of opinion here. They're all saddling up with Dawkins with this ridiculous argument. Like, do you buy Dawkins' argument, or do you buy Atrin, Hendrick, and Sosis?
No, I don't buy Dawkins' argument. I don't think it's
sufficient.
It accounts for one of the.
Not to mention, there's no evidence.
Religiosity. No, it accounts for one.
No one's done any studies.
No, but this is the same. Look. Like I say to you, anything involved in evolutionary psychology, you can find a trait and you can think, yeah, this is an evolved trait. But once you start to give the reasons for why it's evolved, there's always an element of guesswork involved, right? And that's something that you just have to accept with evolutionary biology, because unless you were to place intimately look at the lifestyles back in history of individual after individual and every decision that they make and how it impacts upon their reproductive fitness, there's no way of actually saying, there's no way of deciphering. It's effectively a best guess.
It's a tough problem. It is a very tough problem. And when I was reading all those books, End of Faith, The God Delusion, I mean, I've read them all. The question that always was in my mind is does religion do more harm than good? And they've made a very forceful case, a very convincing case, that there is no God. I don't believe there's a God. Most scientists don't believe there's a God. The question, though, is, does religion at the level of society in a sociological sense do more harm than good? And the anti-theists are making the claim that it does. You've agreed with it. It's the one. Number 5 is the number one thing that when people reposted my questions on Twitter, didn't change at all. Religion does more harm than good. That is an assertion without evidence. And what is an assertion without evidence?
I think I tell you where there's some disagreement. I think here you're talking about burden of proof, and I don't think this is a burden of proof issue here. Right? It's not for me.
You have to do some kind of cost-benefit analysis, don't you? I mean,
but I think it's a balance. We're talking about a preponderance of evidence, a balance of evidence here. We're talking about
they're going to take the evidence. They're only citing the evidence where religion does harm. Most of them won't even cite any evidence that religion does any good. Well, so they're doing the same thing religious people do. They're counting the hits.
I don't know what to say. I can only talk for me, right? I'm prepared. I'm prepared to accept that the good that religion does as well, potentially. Then you've got to look at, well, the things that religion is doing. Would these things find surrogates if you get rid of religion? And in the UK, they seem to have done. It doesn't. I mean, look, if you want my take on this, right, is that. If you look across the last 70 years within the United Kingdom, if you're looking at, I don't know, women's rights, children's rights, if you're looking at social support for children, for disabled people, for old people, for infirm people, if you're talking about the welfare state and the way that we support people generally, if you're talking about rights for homosexuals and the way that we treat that, no more would we take somebody like Alan Turing, who was, fundamental, one of the pillars in us all winning the Second World War, and prosecuting him for his homosexuality. He'd be allowed to get married. Now, the changes with things like abortion, you can look at all these different things and all these moral changes, all of which in actual fact that I regard as good, and most of them have been made on the backs of moral claims, right, of empathy for other people. And this, I can't even say that this has happened. Christianity has held sway in the United Kingdom for almost 2,000 years. And I don't even have to say within 70 years of Christianity going, these things have happened. It's even better than that. Christianity hasn't even gone. It's just declined. It's just as it's declined, these other things that Christianity, some of these things, Christianity, some of them, it'd be a bit harsh to say that it could have created a welfare state such as we have now 1,000 years ago, but some of these things, such as attitudes towards homosexuality that are based upon empathy of fellow human beings, it's had 2,000 years to have done something about that and hasn't managed to do so. And I don't think we've become more empathetic. I don't think we've become nicer people, but the fact is it was hamstringing people's empathy. It doesn't matter how empathetic you were towards homosexuals. If the religion says it's wrong, then that is what you are stuck with, right? And that is the level.
We're going to disagree on that, but that's a tough one because it's a very. I mean, we're disagreeing on a fundamental way people think. Like you have a fundamental difference, and you think people are motivated by, and there is some back and forth. I don't want to say that it's all one direction, but I think people are more motivated by their own intuitions and their own self-interests and are using religion to justify those interests and intuitions. And you're saying people are mostly motivated by the rules and regulations of religion.
Some people are hamstrung. There are people who are religious who their personal opinion, they feel.
I would say the people that are hamstrung. Yeah, I would say the people that are hamstrung don't really have any intuitions of their own. And the people that do have strong intuitions are not gonna accept the hamstring. Like me, I have strong intuitions that drove me away from religion. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have strong intuitions on a subject, which, whatever the rules are legally by religion or whatever, a lot of times you're going to override those because you have strong intuitions. But if you have no intuitions on a topic, you don't care about a topic, you're not invested in a topic, a lot of times you'll just go along to get along, like whatever the rules are, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's difficult. For me, when you talk about wanting this evidencing, and yet if I can show you a situation,
I don't want people to make blind assertions on the internet.
I get that, but I mean, I could show you situation after situation where religious people think one way, non-religious people are thinking another way, and your response is, well, it's nothing to do with their religious belief. It's just kind of irrelevant. That it wouldn't make any difference. They could all not believe in God, and their beliefs would be exactly the same, because somehow the religion is based on. I don't think the religion is based on their intuition, because they don't get to decide what the Catholic Church says.
It is a radical point of view, and I understand that, and it's a virtually inarguable. Nobody wants to believe this, right? It's the same debate as, like, does free will exist? There are biological determinists that think free will really doesn't exist.
No, I don't think it exists, actually. But
you're hilarious.
No, I'm not a determinist. No, I'm a pessimistic incompatibilist.
But you don't think free will exists?
I think that it cannot. I think it's a nonsensical.
You heard it here first. Yeah. I don't know. Have you made videos on this?
Yeah, somewhere down the line, long time ago. But yes, about 2011, I think, something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
But that is kind of the position that I'm making. If you don't think free will exists, what difference does a religion make?
Because, well, but that doesn't mean you can't influence, right? Because we're all part of a larger system. So I can still influence.
Okay,
I can still throw my mug through the window, can I? And it would still, if the window isn't open, it'll still smash the window. We can live in a totally deterministic world, but if I can convince you of something, your opinion will still change. I can still influence you. Right? It just means that if it was deterministic, that would mean that it's all effectively, if you know the first principles, you know what you end up at the end. Now, I'm not a determinist. I believe that there is indeterminism, right? But it's random. So indeterminism is indistinct from so
it's not free will. That's
so well, what is there? What is for? We're getting onto a different discussion. We shouldn't.
No, we are. We shouldn't do it. Yeah, exactly.
Really discussion is there, before we wrap this up. I've enjoyed this discussion. I mean, it's what I expect. I haven't changed your mind. You haven't changed my mind. But I think
we did get some clarity on number 5, and yes. My problem is, like, there are these, like, most people don't even know the two arguments that are out there. Like, they just assert that Dawkins is right and the God delusion is right. No, there are others. There are scientists that are actively studying this, and scientists have this tendency, like, they don't want to devote a lot of time and energy to hypotheses that they don't think are going to pan out. And I think that's why nobody's done any research into Dawkins, parasitic meme argument. But you say Dennett explored it much more in his book, and I actually read that book, but it's been so long I don't really remember it.
It was with me. Look, I'll be honest, I couldn't tell you a detailed analysis through that book, but what he did, because it was you were talking 9-10 years ago, something like that, when I read that book, but he does explore. He does say that religion, it has to work on a cultural level. He doesn't just look at it in the sort of parasitic, viral sense. He does say it has to work, and it has to work for everybody within that culture, which is an interesting thing, because it's it's sloppily easy to make the argument for why it works for the priest. It's not
or the elite.
To make the argument for how it works for the congregation, but you need to make that argument. It needs to be working for everybody. Otherwise, why would you be accepting it? Why would it become so prevalent? So I thought there's some really, really good food for thought within that book, and I didn't really think that Haidt gave it as much as it deserves. I admit that when you're talking about some of the arguments that then he progresses onto with regard to group selection of religion and religions, because clearly it's a really interesting idea, this idea of the competition of religions, right? And obviously there's political factors as well, isn't there? There's
definitely
the Roman Empire, and is it Constantinople who adopted it as his religion? Obviously things like that play a big part. It's no coincidence that it is two of the most proselytizing religions ever that have been the most successful religions. That's not because so it's not just because they're more socially cohesive. It's because it's two religions that say, go out there and spread the word. And there's been many religions, there have been religions over the years. I say many religions. There have been religions that promote celibacy. Clearly a religion that promotes celibacy isn't going to last particularly long.
Don't they promote celibacy, though, in just the priestly class? So.
No, well, some of them. I mean, if you look at, for example, in early Christianity, some of the documents which are non-canonical, but with good reason, that are attributed to Paul of Tarsus. And Paul, he makes arguments in favor of leading a celibate lifestyle. You can understand why those documents didn't become canonical, because it's obviously very much against the interests of the church to promote some of those things.
And probably the people that want to have sex.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, although quite interesting when you read about it, back in the day, people had quite a different attitude towards sex, because it led to childbirth, and childbirth was a very, very dangerous thing to do. You know, there was quite a good chance that you could die in childbirth. So, yeah, perhaps people had a slightly different outlook, or there was a chance to have a slightly different outlook on it back in the day. But yes, I'll you know, to sort of sum up, I'll agree with you that people present sometimes a perspective that's slightly lacking on this, and I'd side with you on that. But from my perspective, in the world that I want to live in, and especially a world that I want to live in as somebody who doesn't believe in God, that wants to be able to have the conversations that I need to be able to have in my society, I think that religion is doing more harm than good. And I think that it's holding back those conversations. And I think that a lot of the social cohesiveness aspects that religion is good at, we're finding new ways to do it. I mean, we're doing one of them now. There's a hangout here with 140 people, and this online thing is a kind of it's an arrangement we couldn't have had, right? We couldn't have had this back in the day. You know, the church, the town hall, and maybe the public house, the tavern. These were the groups which was they were the civic group that dealt with civic matters, and the social group that gave you the social things that you need as an individual. I think we can find them in separate grounds now. It's a much more dynamic environment that we're living in. You know? Yeah. We can solve these things. Yeah, and we don't even need to go out. The beautiful thing of it is, because it's part of something that we desire and need, from my perspective, we don't even need to engineer it. You know, I hear, especially from people in the States sometimes, because maybe they live in an environment, certainly in certain parts of the United States, where religion is still very dominant and there's a church on every street corner. They say, well, we're going to have to replace this with something else. These things, for me, have been replaced. A lot of them have been replaced, and we've not, in Western Europe, and we've not gone out of our way to do that. It's just happened. People have just picked up on things, picked up on different other ways of congregating, of forming social cohesions and social groups. It's not been something that people have had to do for its own sake, you know?
Yeah, we do have a real problem with hyper partisanship in the present day, and people really at each other's throats over moral issues and political issues. So, I mean, things have gotten better in having a discussion about religion, almost like nobody cares, but there are discussions that you can't have around, you know, race and gender that have kind of replaced that.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And some of these things that they're bringing the same issues, you know, it's the same problems that we had before. But in some ways, for me to say, well, yeah, we're still going to have irrational thinking. We're still going to have things that people trying to stifle discussion. So what's the point? We might as well stick with religion. That doesn't work for me. Let's tackle these as two separate things. If religion is a problem in terms of stifling discussions and holding people back, or holding those discussions back, let's deal with that. But let's deal with these other things as well. And it might be a case that perhaps one thing I see within the United Kingdom is sometimes that we're not good enough. There's this sense that nationalism is a terrible thing and identity is a terrible thing. And we do really badly on this, you know. And one of the things that I think we need to be a bit more proud of is the way that we think. It's not a case of waving the flag in terms of nationalism, but in terms of our national identity, in terms of the way that we think and the way that we tackle things, and being proud with that, being proud about free speech, being proud about people allowed to espouse their views. This is one of the things the government did. I don't know if you saw it in a video a couple of weeks ago with regard to universities. And they have come out and said they are going to hold universities to task, right, if they don't stand up for free speach on their campuses. They've maybe looked at what's happening in the USA and thought, we don't want that to be mirrored. Some of it has already happened in the UK. Some of it's already happened in the UK. And I think they've thought, yeah, let's try and nip this in the bud. And that's a really good thing, you know, I think. And we have to be prepared to be proud of those things, I think.
Ben Shapiro spoke at UCLA last night, and there was this, like, the SWAT team out there. It's hilarious.
It's interesting to see where all that will end. So yeah, I think we've probably.
Want to leave it there?
I think so. I mean, there were other questions, but I think we've largely answered everything that was on these lists, haven't we? I mean,
I think we've kind of barely scratched the surface myself, but the one of the reasons why I joined YouTube was to have this conversation, and nobody wanted to have this conversation with me. I feel like more and more people are ready to have that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of duty bound.
I think this is.
Everybody's left from where I joined. They're either left or don't talk about these things anymore. So I feel like I've got some obligation as.
Are you a member? Are you a member of the skeptic community?
Shit, a brick. Sorry. Nothing to do with what you said. I've got a flask of coffee here. Hotter than the fucking center of the sun. I just poured another cup out. I've just burnt my mouth. Am I a member of the skeptic community? I don't know. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing. That the idea of a skeptic community is it's a ridiculous label to apply to yourself. It's maybe okay as an ironic label to apply to somebody else. I've always said, right, skeptic is a label for other people to apply to you, not a label to apply to yourself. I don't try and see myself as a member of any community as such, because then you start to become beholden to what the rest of that community is saying. I'd rather just answer for myself, and if people think I'm a twat, well, at least I'm a twat on the basis of
you're YouTube skeptic royalty.
Yeah.
No,
well,
come on.
You can say, if you want to say I'm a skeptic, that's up to you to say, but it's not something that it's not a label that I apply to myself, is what I would say.
Okay.
So
good to know.
Yeah.
So you want to end it there? Do you want to? Yeah. I'll stay on the line if you want to end the stream. Thanks for joining, everyone. I'm super curious what the comments are going to be on this discussion. I feel it's probably obviously going to be. It's your channel. It's obviously going to be like 10-1 for you. But I know there are a lot of people. I know there are a lot of people who are reading Haidt, and Haidt is kind of getting into. Haidt is really just a synthesis of a lot of different researchers that are working on this, and the whole group level selection, multi-level selection is still an ongoing debate, and it's one of the most interesting debates I think in science right now, in sociology. So I'm curious what people think.
Do you want to field some of the? If you want to field some of these comments, I mean, I've got an hour's ride to work in about 40 minutes, so I need to start getting ready. If I click stop broadcast, it stops it. If I click leave call, does that leave you still going? And you want to field some comments?
Not really. I have stuff I have to do too. Okay. So you can just
So we'll end it. So thank you to everybody for listening in. I hope you've got something out of it. And take care. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye for now. That's my line.